Hello. I'm going to be doing this live session on translating English to mathematics. It doesn't really go with a particular section and kind of takes pieces from chapter 1 because they do a little translating in each of the sections. And then it takes some pieces of chapter 2, 2.1, which we look at this week. And I'm just kind of combining all the translating pieces together. That's what this is. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And of course, this may take a while because it always takes a while to transition. And waiting. There we go. Okay. Translating English to mathematics. Okay. So actually, before I move up to just talking about the words, a lot of people like to say that they are either math people or English people. And so when I teach translating English to math, I like to make the connection between English and math because math is like a language. So if you're good at English and you're good at writing and grammar or putting things together, then if you think about math that way, that should aid you because mathematics really is just learning another language. It's not like they have things that are considered verbs, we have phrases, we have sentences, we have nouns. We're just different terminology that we use for all those things. So if you try to think about this as you're just learning another language and think of the symbols as learning the alphabet, then it's not really foreign anymore. It's just another skill. You've done this before. You've learned the alphabet when you're growing up. You learned a language when you're growing up. You can do this again. So I'm going to just start with addition. So we have words that indicate that we are adding. These words are sum, plus, added to, more than. More than is really important because a lot of people think more than is a greater than or equal to symbol. But if it's an expression, if it says that you are translating an expression, then that means addition. So more than equals addition if we have an expression. And so it's really important to understand the terminology. An expression just means we have a phrase. It's unfinished. An equation is a sentence. It's something finished that you can do something with. But if you have a phrase, you're not done. So if you see the word more than and you have an expression, you have something that's not finished, then that's telling us it's addition. Then some other words are increased by and total. These phrases are things, especially increased by and total. Those show up a lot in the real world. So it's really important to know that those mean things are being added. So I have examples here, a phrase, and then I'm going to translate it. And sometimes the order matters. For addition, order does not matter. So we have 4 added to y. And then we can write that literally as 4 plus y. Although if we're saying something is added on, we usually put it afterwards. So we can also write it as, actually, let me make this smaller. So you can write this as 4 plus y, but you can also write it as y plus 4. Those mean the same thing. 23 more than x. That's another one where generally that would mean we're having x and then we're adding 23 to it. But because addition, the order doesn't matter, we can also write that as 23 plus x. It doesn't matter. And if you've gone through 2.1 or 1.7 and 2.1, then you'll see that this is the associative property of addition. So it's the order of addition doesn't matter. Now the sum of x and y, those are always just written x plus y. So that one doesn't necessarily have to be written in one order or the other. And w increased by 8. So we have w, and then we're increasing it by adding 8 to it. And then the total of 4 and y, that's going to be 4 plus y. So it's just like the first one where it says 4 is added to y. But generally 4 added to y is translated as y plus 4, while the total of 4 and y would be 4 plus y. But they're equivalent because the order for addition does not matter. Now, let's take a look at subtraction. So first, let's move to the right, phrases for subtraction. Difference. The difference between things means you're going to be subtracting. The word minus, that's actually the name of the sign. Subtracted from, decreased by, less than. That's another one. That if you see less than, and you have an expression, then this is equal to subtraction. So if you have a phrase, if it's not a sentence, then it's not the less than or equal to sign or the less than sign. It means subtraction. So it's really important to understand the context. Think of it as we have words in English that are spelled the same but pronounced differently depending on the context. Like read, I am reading something, or and then read, I read something. They're spelled exactly the same, but they're pronounced differently based off of the context. So less than is one of those phrases that is translated differently based off of context. If it's an expression, then we have subtraction. But if it says that we are writing an inequality, then it would be a less than sign. If it says an equation, then it's also going to be subtraction, because an equation means we have to have an equal sign. So the less than sign will contradict the equal. So it always translates as subtraction unless it specifically says inequality. So that's something that's really important to know. So I should say expression or equation. It always becomes subtraction. So it's all based off of context. It's the same thing with English words, context. So some examples here. X minus negative 2. So that gets translated literally as it's written. X, the minus sign, and then that's a negative 2. So X minus negative 2. 7 less than Y. So that one gets translated that saying we have Y and then we have 7 less than that. So we're subtracting 7 from Y. So that is one where we are subtracting 7 from Y. For subtraction, order matters that you write these things here, because we can't just switch the order. There is no property that allows us to do that. So the order that you translate these things really matters. And so the ones that get translated in the opposite order would be if you see that less than, and then the subtracted one is another one. Let's see, decreased by is also, no, that one's not translated. Subtracted from a lesson, those are the ones that are translated in a different order. They're kind of, the order is switched around. If you've ever learned another, like a foreign language, sometimes some languages, like I took Latin in high school because I was a big nerd and I wanted to do something different. And Latin always puts your verb at the very end of the sentence. So they're kind of like, it's like reverse Yoda, I guess. If you said, I read a book, Latin would translate that as I book read. So the order that, it gets translated in the opposite order. It kind of, the things get flip-flopped. So subtraction is sort of the same way. Some phrases flip-flop the order. So they sort of become Yoda-fied. So let's see, the next one we have here is m decreased by 3. So that one is just in order. That's going to be m minus 3. Then the difference between y and 4, that one goes in order. So that's y minus 4. And then if subtract 9 from z, we're taking it from z. So we're starting with z, and then we are removing 9. So it's z minus 9. So that's another one where they're in the opposite order. So you're going to really want to pay attention to that and maybe put a little indication somewhere that these are the phrases that get translated in the opposite order. But for addition, it doesn't matter. Now, multiplication, the words that basically mean multiplication would be product, times, and multiplied. We don't have a lot of choices there. There are some, I'm going to actually write the word of, because a lot of times of is also indicating multiplication. And I do have an example of that as well. So I have 10 times t, so that's just 10t. We have an implied, you could write the dot for multiplication, but it's implied. Twice. So that's knowing that twice means 2 in English. So that would mean twice w means 2w. 1/2 of x. So that's an example where the of translates as multiplication. So that'd be 1/2 times x. The product of y of z is y times z. And then y multiplied by -2. And we're going to put the negative in parentheses so that it doesn't look like y minus 2. It's y times -2. So I always put parentheses there to make sure we don't want it to look like negative. That would be, or if we don't want to look like subtraction. So if you didn't have the parentheses, you're miscommunicating. That would be like if you left off a very important comma. I don't know if you've ever seen the play on words about eating grandma, or what is it? Let me look up the exact thing. There's a phrase that says, let's eat grandma. And depending where the comma means, it gives a different different meaning. Well, I'm going to actually just pull this up. Let's eat grandma. There's no comma that's saying you're going to literally eat your grandma. But if you have let's eat, comma, grandma, then you're telling your grandma, let's eat. That's like that comma in English is very important, just like parentheses in English is very important. So having the parentheses for this multiplication is the difference between subtraction and multiplication. So those kind of things are really important. And if you think, oh, parentheses don't matter, or this doesn't matter, like it really doesn't. It's these symbols, parentheses, plus signs, multiplication symbols, these are like the punctuation of English. And so it's really important to have the correct punctuation, because otherwise you're communicating something completely different from what you intend. Okay, moving on to my next one, division. So some words that mean division. And the other thing with division is that division is the same as writing things as a fraction. So usually when we indicate division, when we move on to algebra, we write things as fractions instead of using the division symbol. So some words are quotient, divided by, divided into, ratio of, over, and per. Per always means division. So that's a really important thing, because you see that a lot in miles per hour. That literally means miles divided by hours. So anything you see the word per, which shows up all the time in English, that is telling you that you're actually dividing these things. So if we have x divided by 12, we are going to write these as fractions. So that's going to be x over 12. The quotient of y and z, we write that in the order y over z. And then the ratio of t to 9, that would be t over 9. Ratios are always written as fractions. You may see them as little dots, but in math, the dots are not helpful, so we always write them as fractions. So division, write it as a fraction, because that's going to be a lot more useful when we deal with algebra. Now, exponents and roots, these don't really have set words, because you can have, there's lots of examples, but the most common things are having an exponent of 2 or exponent of 3, and then taking a square root or a cubed root. And these are very similar. So if you look at my examples here, the only difference is whether it has the word root or not. And so a lot of people get these confused, because it's one word difference. And it makes a big deal. It's like in English, you can have a sentence where it means practically the same thing, but there's one word that's different, and the meaning changed. Or, you know, like let's eat grandma. The only thing that's different between the two is the comma, and the meaning completely changed. So it's the same thing here. So if this says the square, that means you are squaring or have an exponent. So the square of x would be x squared. The cube of a would be a to the power of 3, a cubed. But if it says the square root, that is the square root symbol instead. And the cubed root, which is something that you will not learn about to college algebra, but I'm going to just kind of write it here, is the same symbol, but it just has a little 3. That is a different symbol. So you want to pay attention to whether it has the word root or not, because that tells you which symbol to use. So math is all about the details, and learning algebra is all about learning the grammar and the punctuation. So this is very important. So I've got several examples here, and I'm going to kind of walk you through the translating process. So these are all going to be translated into equations. So if it's translating into an equation, that means that we have sentences. So if you have a complete sentence, you can make it an equation. If you don't have a sentence, if you have a phrase, then it's an expression. And what makes something a complete sentence is that there is a noun and a verb. And the verb in our case is going to be our symbol, the equal sign. So verb is the equal sign. So if you're good with grammar and you know your verbs, look for where the verb is. That's where your equal sign is located. So our first example, the sum of 31 and a number is 13. So I'm going to highlight is a verb. So where that is, where that word, and I'm going to highlight every place in these 3 examples where you see is, those are where the equal sign is going to be. So think of verb, the equal goes with is. So I'm going to just place an equal sign above all the locations of is. That is going to be where the equal is. Now, wherever you see the word and, that's usually where we're going to have a symbol, where we're going to have a plus or a minus or some division or multiplication. Wherever those ands show up, that's usually where the symbols show up, because that's how you're putting things together. That's separating out different terms. So, and as a symbol, and it separates terms. And so we then look to see what words we have to determine what that symbol is. So in our first sentence, we have the sum of 31 and a number. So that sum tells us that's going to go, that the symbol is a plus, because sum means addition. So same thing, the second example. Sum means addition, so I'm going to put it where my and is. Third example here, it says the product. Product means multiplication, so I'm going to put my multiplication symbol right there. So now I've translated 2 symbols. I have my equal sign, and then I have my and that I've translated. And now it's, what do we have left? What have we not yet translated? Well, that is the things surrounding. We have these gaps that you can see. So it says the sum of 31. So I'm going to literally just write 31 right there, because that's where it's located. And then it says a number. So if it says a number, that could be a variable. And you can use anything you want. So you can use any letter. I usually use N to represent number. So I just put 31 to the left, because the word 31 is to the left of and. And then to the right of and is N, so I put my N. And then I have a gap after the equal sign, and after the word is 13, so I just place that there, and now translated it. It's like it's just structured in a way that once you figure out where you put your symbols, you just read it left to right and fill in the blanks. It's really nice. Okay, second sentence. So we've got our symbols, so now I have to fill in the blanks. I have to fill in the left of the plus sign, and to the left of the plus sign it says -12. I'm going to fill in -12. Then to the right of the plus sign I have a number, so I'm going to use a variable. This time I'll use x just for variety. And then I have to fill in after the equal sign, and it says -15. So I'm going to type it or write in -15. There I am. There it goes. Now, third one here, I have the multiplication symbol, so I have to fill in the left of the multiplication and the right of the multiplication. So left of the multiplication, I have -3. To the right of the multiplication, I have a number. So let's do A. Let's just, go through, have some variety. Now I need to fill out the right of equal sign. So after the word is, it says the same as 24. The same is the same thing as saying equal, so that's just extra. We don't really need it. We just need to care about the 24. And there I go. It's really not that bad. Once you figure out where to put your symbol or what the symbol is, you just fill in the blanks. Just basically in the order, left to right, just like we read it. Okay, now I've got 3 more examples here, and these are about as difficult as it gets for the sections that you have read. Once you get to college algebra, there's usually more complicated ones that involve parentheses, and those are sentences that include commas. So if you have an English sentence that you have to translate into math and it has commas, the commas are separating out parts that are in parentheses. So you don't have to worry about any of those in this class, though. They don't usually get that complicated. These were as complicated as I could find in the homework or in the practice problems. So first step, let's find all of our verbs. So I'm going to highlight those in yellow. So let's see, the value 3 subtracted from a number is. Okay, there's my is. 18 is. Okay. The difference of a number and 2/3 is. So I've got all of my is's highlighted, and so I'm going to write an equal sign above every single one of those. Next, I'm going to highlight my ands. So let's see, the value -3 subtracted from a number. So there's no and in that case. So we'll do that one separately. 18 is equal to the quotient of a number and, so I can put my and there. And then the difference of a number and, there we go. So we'll do the first one separate, but let's just, those ands, let's talk about the two with the ands. So the one in the middle, 18 is equal to the quotient. So now that I found the word quotient, that means division. And so that means I'm going to have a fraction. So when I have my fraction, what's before the fraction goes on top. So before the word and is number, so I'll just use n. And then what's after the word and is 2, so that's going to be on the bottom. So translating a quotient, a fraction, is a little different because instead of just putting the division symbol at the and, we're writing a fraction. And then what's before it goes on top, what's after goes on the bottom. The third example here, we also have an and. It says the difference. So difference means subtraction. I'm going to put a minus sign. And difference is one where you just go left to right. So the left is the number, so I'll just say n. To right is 2/3, so I'm going to fill that in. So I've got those, and I've translated, and let me just finish off this last one because it's pretty simple. So we have the difference of a number in 2/3, that's n minus 2/3 is, and then it says 1/3. So I can just finish that off. That equals 1/3. Let's work our way up. Let's do the one in the middle. It says 18 is, so to the left of the equal sign, I'm just going to write 18. And so 18 is equal to, I already had the equal sign there. And then I've got my quotient of a number in 2 translated. So that's literally, I'm going to just rewrite this, 18 equals n over 2. Big gap there just because we have lots of extra words, but that's how it translates. Okay, now let's look at the top one because that one we didn't have the word and. So this one's a little different. Let's subtracted from. So let me go back to our subtraction. And so subtracted from. So from we're going to put in the same category as and. So because if you look at the example here, subtract 9 from z, the symbol was between the 9 and the z, although it was in the opposite order. So do note that. So when I go to my example here, where the word from is, I'm going to highlight that. We're going to treat that like the and that's going to be our subtraction symbol. And then when you see subtracted from, or if you see that from, you want to think opposite order. So from is subtraction, opposite order. So to the left of the word from, we have the value -3, and we have that subtracted from. So that -3 is actually going to go after. And I'm going to put parentheses there because we have that two negative signs, and I don't want those to get confused. After the word from, we have a number, so that one's actually going to go first. We put these in opposite order. And then we just need to finish off what's after the equal sign, and it says 4, so that's going to be 4. So this first one is a little trickier because we didn't have the word and. We had to look for the word from. And what is that? Is and a participle? I'm not an English teacher. I know enough about like verbs and nouns, but I don't know what the names of these kind of things from and are these prepositions? Are they conjunctions? I think from is a preposition, and I'm so I'm not really sure about, but that's just think of it as like and in the same when we're translating. That's where the symbol is going to go. Another one where the symbol is let's go to addition, where instead of saying and, we'll have the word more than, to, by. Those things, the words that are not actually using the adding word, that would be where the symbol is. So if I go back, add 4 added to y, the symbol is between 4 and y. 23 more than, the symbol is between 23 and x. Here we have the sum of, it was between the and, x and y, increased by, so it's between the w and the 8, total 4 and y, there was the and, so it's between 4 and y. So those kind of words that are not nouns or like adjectives, those other smaller words, those are the ones where the symbols are going to be between. And let's take a look at the same sort of thing here. So with the subtraction, think of it the word than, but that one is going to be in reversed order. The word by, again, we have a symbol between there. Difference, the symbol is between the and then from, the symbol was between there, but that was in the reversed order. So some of these are in reversed order, but it does go in between. And even on multiplication, the word and, you put the multiplication symbol in between. Multiplied by, multiplication symbol was in between. Of, it's in between. And then the other ones don't really have those words, but they're just connected together. And then if we look at division, by was where the division occurred, and it was the first over the second. And that's where the division occurred, first over the second. And when we have the ratio of this to this, the word to, that's where it occurred. So these words to, by, and, than, from, these words, those are where all the symbols are occurring when you're translating. So you want to look for those. And it doesn't apply for exponents and roots because those are not translated by connecting two things together. They're adding things or to the symbol, basically. So it doesn't apply for exponents and roots, but for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, it does apply. So that were all the examples that were. Here I am trying to explain math in terms of English and grammar and I can't even talk properly. Those were all the examples that I had. Hopefully my explanation of what to look for and how to compare these to English makes sense and helps it make more sense to you, especially if you say you're an English person, not a math person. When you start getting into word problems, and we'll be seeing word problems next week in week 3, they get a little more complicated, but you want to try to use the same ideas to help put these things together. So if you have questions, you know how to reach me, and I hope you guys have a great weekend and wonderful holidays, and I will talk to you later. Bye.